Hey, Margie here. In our modern world, oftentimes we forget about the power of circadian rhythm. And there are few practices that you can do every day that will improve your bones, overall health, reduce your stress, and increase your happiness. So if you're ready to learn those, then you are in the right place because I'm very excited about our special guest, Jason Prall. And Jason is a health educator, practitioner, author, and filmmaker. His independent research and experience as a practitioner led him to create the Human Longevity Project, a 9-part film series that uncovers the true nature of chronic disease in our modern world. He's also the author of the critically acclaimed book, Beyond Longevity, a proven plan for healing faster, feeling better, and thriving at any age. And the best part of this is what he discusses is free, and it's something we can all put into our lives. So lots of great information. Stay tuned. Welcome, Jason. So happy to have you here on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we get started on this topic, which is something that I love and can really, really make a difference in people's lives, why don't you just share a little bit about your background, how you got into this work, because you've done so many amazing things. And I just think I always love to know, how you got to be so passionate about the work you're currently doing.
Well, that's just it. Like I kind of stumbled into this, I would say against my free will to some degree. So, I had a bunch of health challenges when I was younger. I had knee pain that started at 13 and lasted decades. I had skin conditions and issues from in my early 20s that I couldn't get answers for. And so because I tried a lot of the only channels I knew at that point, right? I mean, you got to remember, this is kind of before the internet, like right at the beginning of the internet. I had chat rooms, and that's how I discovered alternative health. Was I was in these weird chat rooms and listening to random people talk about what worked for them in their health issues. Social media didn't exist. There was no Google at that point. So, I was kind of just digging around and just uncovering the kind of the stuff that was really that I was told was just not true, right? From how to deal with pain to what was really causing my skin conditions. I started to uncover all the falsities that I was being fed, and just basically at that point took everything into my own hands and said, okay, I got to figure this out. And so, pursued just the truth around what health is and what was really underlying my health issues. And so just in that pursuit of truth, I started to kind of find my way in the world of health. And eventually I became that person that my friends and other people would ask random questions to regarding health and fitness and food and all these things. And so at some point in my engineering career, I was 10 years in and kind of at the peak, right? When you're 10 years, it takes you a while to become like a decent engineer. Like you're just not good right away. You're kind of useless coming out of college. But I started to find my way. And at that point, I had to make a decision. Do I want to continue this career path of being an engineer, become a partner at a firm and kind of lock it in, or do I pivot? And I just found myself, that I wasn't really passionate about engineering. I didn't really care. I was good at math. I was good at physics. So I pursued that because I was good at it, but I never really cared. And what I really cared about was not just health, but helping people, right? What I realized was that there's so many people out there struggling and don't know how to get answers to their health issues. And if I could just help people kind of climb out of that spiral, then they can pursue the things that they really love in their life. And so I made a pivot at that point, sold my house, sold almost everything I owned, moved from Seattle down to Southern California and started a business doing, as you could say, integrative health coaching. So I was running labs and that kind of thing. And that was where I really cut my teeth. And this became, the theoretical world of health to, can I apply this to other people that is not me, right? And learned a lot in that process as an integrative functional health practitioner. And what I realized in that was that I wanted to, instead of working one-on-one as my primary kind of source of spending my time, I wanted to educate the masses. And so I went on to create, documentary film series and produce health summits and start a podcast and these type of things. So that's really kind of where I landed. And I'm still kind of navigating and figuring out what I want to do next. But I love going into the deeper aspects of, of health, of philosophy, of life, of death, of waking up, and spiritual practices. Like this is all so fascinating to me, and I think there's so much that we can pull from the past and make sure that we bring that with us into this crazy, wild future that we're walking into, that is full of regenerative medicine and robotics and AI and all kinds of crazy stuff, which is very fascinating. But if we don't hold on to the truths of what health is, where it comes from, like the real essential truths, then I think we're going to get lost. And so that's kind of my passion now.
Oh, I love that. Well, there's something that you sort of left out that I think is really important because you've done something that I know very few people have done. Besides just learning the theoretical and applying it to patients, you've traveled all over. You've met people in the blue zones. I mean, you've done documentaries that are unbelievable. And so you've really gotten to see the people who are living this. And has that completely changed how you practice and what you talk about?
In a sense, like there was, I kind of understood some of the things. So when began filming the Human Longevity Project, going around to the blue zones, I kind of knew what I knew what to expect. I kind of figured out what I was going to learn. In other words, it was sort of understood to some degree, and I just had to convey the message through the film series. However, there was a few things that when you're in these places and you're speaking with these people about their lives, that I feel like you can't know unless you're there. Like there's something important about being in these places. Like for example, when I was in Costa Rica, I remember being there and feeling like time was slowing down, right? Because it's a rural kind of existence. There was a lot of walking. People were not moving fast. Like when you go to New York City, time feels like it's so fast, right? It speeds up, and then you start operating at that pace, and you kind of have to, in a sense, right? Like there's a real it's important. It's like if you're driving on the freeway, you can't go 20 miles an hour. Like that's actually dangerous, right? So you go 70, right? But if you're driving on a rural road, you don't want to go 70 because that's dangerous. So you kind of you mold to your environment, and so that's what I noticed when I was in Costa Rica, and by the way, we were working. This was on vacation in Costa Rica. So I'd only been to these tropical places on vacation before. I'd never actually been working with deadlines and like fighting the clock. And yet time slowed down. And then when I got back and I landed in Houston airport, time sped up again. I felt very chaotic, right? And there was no difference because we were still in work mode. The only difference was the environment. And so that really showed me how important environment is, that goes beyond genetics, that goes beyond the choices that you're making. It's actually the things around you that are influencing you. So that's one example. But even beyond the blue zone work, we've gone and done some work in the Himalayas, working with the Buddhist and Bon cultures, ancient cultures, healing cultures in the Himalayas at 16,000 feet. We were in Peru working with some indigenous healing cultures there, India with Ayurveda. And so this is really, to me, so fascinating to learn from these other cultures what health is, what disease is, what life is about, what death is about. How do we interact? How do we think about these things, and what in the West are we getting right, and what are we getting wrong from their perspective? And so to me, it's like it's really this blend of knowledge that I think is so valuable. And I think when you get outside of the West, you develop different perspectives that you can then integrate into your own culture.
Oh, I just love that. So when we were talking before, like what would be the most impactful thing you could share with my audience who really is concerned about bone health as well as overall health and well-being? And you had said, let's talk about circadian rhythm because
Yeah.
this really transcends so many things and has made such an impact on all the people you've worked with as well as you've seen in other cultures. So you want to just start out explaining what this is and how we can bring this into our lives?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was working one-on-one in my clinical practice, no matter who came to me, whether they had cancer or, osteopenia or gut issues or autoimmune conditions, whatever the case was, I had to assess their lifestyle, right? And see what they're doing, right? Before we ran labs, because we could run labs right at the beginning, but if we can adjust some lifestyle factors, then I want to do that first before I run labs, right? And a good example would be like the Dutch test, right? Which is a dried urinary panel for hormones, right? So you test hormones this way. And what I would tell clients is I don't want to run this panel and check your hormones yet because I know that there's things we can do to improve them first. So let's do that, and then we'll check and see what's going on. And one of the things I would have people do is really dial in their circadian rhythm. So this idea of chronobiology, the sort of integration of time in our biology. So we're all guided by this 24-hour cycle, right? Driven by the sun, right? This is primordial, right? We cannot get away from this fact. Um, we all know that of course we sleep at night and we're awake during the day, but there's nuance to this, right? And this is something that Ayurveda has known, that Chinese medicine has known, not just known about, but intricately studied and really bring into their practice. And the idea is that the body functions based off of this 24-hour cycle. And we all know this. Well, if for those who have traveled across time zones, you really know this, right? We call it jet lag. So if I fly from San Diego to London in 7, 8 hours, my body is going to still think I'm on San Diego time, right? When in fact, I'm in London. So my all of my biological function, my digestive timing, when I'm going to sleep, when my melatonin is produced, when my cortisol is produced, when my thyroid hormone spikes, when my growth hormone spikes, all of these things are being guided, or rather predicted, based off of the past function being in San Diego. So my body has recognized there's a timing. Okay, the sun comes up at this time, the sun goes down at this time. So it predicts the future based off of the past. Well, I just threw a loop in my body's sort of signaling mechanisms, right? I'm now in London. The sun is coming up at a totally different time. So now my body is predicting wrong, which is what jet lag is. So eventually, with the signals of light and exercise and meal timing and these type of things, my body starts to understand what time of day it is. And then based off of enough days being in London, my body can start to predict what time the sun's going to come up and what time it's going to go down, right? So that's the idea of circadian biology. Now, why does this matter? It goes so far beyond sleep. In 2017, there was a Nobel Prize given in science and medicine to 3 scientists studying chronobiology, mechanisms within the body of how this works, right? And so essentially what we can think of is that there's these little clock genes, these little timing genes inside every cell of our body. So that means the function of each cell, your thyroid, your liver, your bones, your eyes, your skin, every cell has these little clock genes that determine the function based off of the signals that it's getting from the master clock primarily. So the master clock being the suprachiasmatic nucleus, hypothalamus, pituitary, sort of brain based off of the primary cue, which is the light. So the light in our environment, right, primarily coming through the eyes, but also on the skin to some degree, that light and what's being picked up by the eyes communicated through the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain to the pituitary, the hypothalamus, the pineal gland, right? Lots of areas, but primarily I would say the hypothalamus and the pituitary, especially as it relates to bones, right? Maintaining good bone health, there's a primary function of growth hormone in that, right? We need good growth hormone. Well, that's being driven by the pituitary. So if the pituitary is getting the wrong signal from the hypothalamus and the suprachiasmatic nucleus because the lighting environment is off, then you're not going to produce enough growth hormone. You're not going to produce at the right times. Your bone's not going to know what time it is because it's not given the right signals. So that's just one example. But of course, the pituitary governs tons of functions, a variety of hormones that govern function throughout the body, right? Whether it's the kidneys and the antidiuretic hormone, whether it's oxytocin, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, thyroid hormone, what else? All of this is guided by the pituitary. And that pituitary and hypothalamus need that signal from the eyes, from the suprachiasmatic nucleus, in order to tell it when to produce these things, right? And keep in mind, what I'm saying is this is just the hormones. Now, hormones are very big levers or movers in the body. So it is a primary thing that to point to. But even at the genetic level inside each cell, we're talking detoxification, right? We're talking, producing all hormones, even at the mitochondrial level, vitamin D, right? Any anti-aging, any anti-inflammatory pathways that we want to turn on, everything you can think of is being governed by circadian rhythm, chronobiology. They've even looked at this with respect to cancer, right? So they looked at lung tumorigenesis, right? Lung tumors are dependent on the circadian rhythm. So when somebody's circadian rhythm's off, they have a higher incidence of lung tumors than when their circadian rhythm's on, right? We see this a lot with, people that work night shifts, right? Or swing shifts. They have all-cause mortality increases in people who work nights. This is because no matter what you do in that environment, your body's off of the primary rhythm that it needs to be on. So now, because we are living in a modern world, most of us are living inside a house most days, especially throughout the winter. We're not going outside. We're not getting the sun. We don't have the sun in our eyes. The cultures that I visited, they grew up in the, let's say, 1930s Icaria, Greece, or 1940s, rural Costa Rica. They didn't have electricity. So that means when the sun went, they had oil lamps and these things, but that's not really comparable to what we have today. So that means when the sun goes down, they essentially start going to sleep, right? They tell some stories, they do some cleanup, they interact, and then they go to sleep. And they get up when the sun comes up, right? So they are really yoked to the solar cycle. Us in the modern world, we don't have to be. We have luxury of lighting any and all times of day. Right? We can eat whenever we want because food's available and we have refrigeration. And so because of our modern world, we're now throwing our biological clockwork out of whack because it's dependent on when we move, when we eat, and the light that we get. And then the other one is temperature, but that's a little less, I think, relevant in this case. So dependent on those things, when are you eating, when are you moving, and what light is entering your eyes, this will determine your internal biology. And so we have really, really messed that up in the modern world.
Wow. I mean, I love the idea of doing all these things before you do the lab work. And it just shows how it can influence, because a lot of people, do the labs immediately and do these things sort of down the road, but yet they're so incredibly powerful. And so what did you see in other cultures? Like besides people who didn't have the lights, like what certain practices were people doing that really incorporated this and made this a big part of their lives?
Well, I mean, so this is what's fascinating. And, the original Blue Zone work was done by Dan Buettner and National Geographic, and Michel Poulin was the demographer. So I give them a lot of credit in identifying these regions around the world. But I think the conclusions that they drew were a little bit off, and I think a little bit misleading because, the solutions that they gave they gave the impression that if we just do these like 8 things that they're doing, then we can live a long time just like them. But, I said it's a little bit ridiculous because we live in 2 drastically different environments. So we have to put ourselves in their environment, right? So imagine living in a village in 1930 or 1940, and the first time you get electricity is when you're like 40 years old. That means you didn't have refrigeration. That means there's, really no cars. There's no lighting. There's of course no television and all the things that we have today. So they didn't have the distraction that we have. They had to work a lot harder. So that means they were moving their body regularly. That doesn't mean they're exercising. In fact, very few of them really had any play after becoming an adult or outside of being a child. And even in, so let's say late childhood, they're kind of becoming adults because they're expected to kind of contribute. There's not a lot of play. There's not a lot of leisure. There's not a lot of they don't go for runs. They don't do push-ups. Their entire life was physical, right? These people, many of them would walk 30 kilometers just to get, let's say, some fish from the ocean because they lived in a mountain village. Then they'd walk 30 kilometers up a mountain back to so they'd take some cheese because they were shepherds up in the mountain in Sardinia. Then they would walk that down to the ocean. They would sell that and buy some fish, bring that back up the mountain. So you have to imagine that life, right? And then what do you do with that fish? You don't put it in the freezer. You don't put it in the refrigerator. You're eating that right away. So you can dry it, you can salt it, you can do some of these things, but they lived in an environment that had to be in rhythm. So they were in rhythm with the seasons. They were in rhythm with the day. They were moving their bodies all the time, right? When we talk about bone health, right, one of the most important things for bone health is movement, and not only that, strenuous movement, right? So in our modern world, we might think about lifting weights or resistance exercise or Pilates or something along these lines where we're using our body weight to physically push against something or pull something, right? And that's going to provide the stimulus for not only growth hormones, but bones themselves are piezoelectric, which means this actually comes from my engineering world, right? When you push some 2 things together, there's an electrical current and there's a stimulus that happens. So bones will actually regrow based off of that pressure, right? So So they were moving and using their bodies in physically demanding ways on a regular basis throughout the day, right? So they didn't do an hour workout like I'm going to do today and otherwise just kind of walk around, right? They were constantly moving and pushing and utilizing their bodies, and they were in rhythm with the sun. So they were, and when I say in rhythm with the sun, what do I mean? I mean, they were exercising at the right time of day. For them, it was all about basically manual labor to facilitate their lives, which means essentially from sunrise to just before sundown. So they were moving in that proper window, right? They were eating at the proper times of day, right? So they would eat something in the morning, they would eat something in noon, and they'd eat something in the evening. 2 or 3 times a day was typical, but they would never eat pizza at 11 p.m., right? It's not even possible. So this was what was fascinating when I was doing that work was I was actually kind of looking at their culture and saying, wow, they had a difficult life physically, but in some ways it was so easy. They didn't have to make the choice to not eat the pizza at 11 p.m. They didn't have to make the choice to walk through the grocery store and just stick to the outside and avoid all the junk food on the inside. They didn't have to figure out, does this have glyphosate or does it not? So they had, in some ways, a much easier life because they didn't have to make difficult choices. Now the pressure was on, you could say. They had to rely on each other. They had to rely on their village, right? They often went through times of very low food and famine, right? Due to war or due to weather. So there was a lot of other things that they had to worry about. But for us, we are bombarded with distraction, with, non-food items, with, basically a society that has been built to be inside. So we have a totally different challenge, right? So which is why I wanted to make that documentary and say, look, the Blue Zones, you guys did great work, but you're missing two main things, which is we will never live like them as a general society, because that would mean getting rid of electricity, and like we can't go backwards, right? And they never had to deal with the things that we're dealing with. So yes, let's study them and bring their information and wisdom forward, but also we have to analyze our reality and say, what are we doing wrong? And this is one of those things. They didn't have to think about circadian rhythm. They just didn't. That was their only way of life. We actually have to think about it. We have to think about, do I want to wear blue blocking glasses because I'm watching a television show at night so I don't get that blue light, which is, decreasing my melatonin production and throwing off my brain's understanding of what time of day it is. Right. So we have a very different set of circumstances that we have to consider, which is to say that just studying people from the Blue Zones is not enough.
Hey, Margie here. High-quality supplements are a big part of a comprehensive osteoporosis program. To help you, I offer a significant discount every day in my supplement store through FullScript. FullScript has the most extensive catalog of professional-grade supplements and wellness products I've ever found. So all you need to do is go to tinyurl.com, that's tinyurl.com/supplements for less. And you'll get to my FullScript store, and in there, you'll see my favorite bone-building supplements. So make sure to check it out, and the link will also be in the show notes. So let's get back to the show.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so now let's bring it home. I live in New Jersey, not that far from New York City. And, so I certainly don't live in that environment, but I do a lot of the things you're talking about in terms of trying to bring like the blue blocking glasses. That's like part of my life. So why don't you share what you have really seen as move the needle? Because these things can help our bones, our overall, really every aspect of inflammation, just like you said, really every aspect of our health. So I'd love if you'd share your favorite, what you found has really been helpful to people, taking that knowledge and putting it into today's modern world that we actually live in.
Yeah, and it's so important, right? So the reason I'm actually speaking about this today is because this was the primary thing that I needed to address in every client that I saw. So again, no matter what they came in, no matter what conditions, disease, no matter what, imbalances they had, circadian rhythm is so primordial when it comes to life itself, right? So this is ancient. This is billions of years old, right? We're talking whenever life started interacting with the sun, that's when this became a thing, right? So it's so embedded in life itself. So it's really, really critical. So as I started working with clients, the main thing I would have them do is in the morning, as soon as they wake up, go outside. So within the first like 10 or 15 minutes, I need you to go outside and at the very least, just sit out there and let your eyes take in the daylight. What I really want you to do is go for a 15 to 20 minute walk, right? So this is in the winter, in the spring, in the summer, it doesn't matter. It can be cloudy as long as the sun is up, right? Obviously, if the sun is not up and it's still dark outside, this doesn't do any good. But if the sun is up, whether it's behind a cloud, whether it's snowing, whether it's raining, doesn't matter, that your eyes are sensitized to this light. And so getting that 15 to 20 minutes first thing in the morning is really, really critical. It's doing two things. And especially if you go for a walk. If you go for a walk, you're increasing your breathing rhythm, right? That's really important to get that going. You're increasing circulation, you're increasing nitric oxide. You're getting the digestive system moving. You're basically waking up the body just with that very light movement. You don't have to do anything intense, just go for a walk. Now, getting that light in your eyes first thing in the morning is setting your circadian clock. It's telling your brain, this is morning, this is morning, this is morning, right? So if you do that consistently for 2 or 3 weeks, you can start to set your rhythm. And this is so important because this is when sleep starts. Sleep starts as soon as you wake up. In other words, this morning light will impact your ability to produce melatonin at night. So your body starts producing melatonin from the light. We think about melatonin as the darkness hormone. It's only peaking at night when it's dark, but it's being made because of the light. So in order to make a lot of melatonin to get good sleep at night, you need light during the day. So getting that 15 to 20 minutes at minimum, first thing in the morning is critical. And again, this is right when you wake up. So within the 10 or 15 minutes, skip your coffee. Don't take a shower yet. Just throw on your clothes, brush your teeth if you need to. You can do some morning, gratitude, whatever you want to do for 10 or 15 minutes, great. But then go outside. So if you can do that, and then ideally throughout the day, just getting your eyes exposed to light. So if you work at an office, right, go for a little walk at lunch. Just make sure you're getting outside a little bit during the day. So the more light that you can expose your eyes to during the day, and this doesn't mean you're staring at the sun. This just means you're outside, allowing that natural daylight, that ambient glow to hit your eyes. This will
in terms of glasses, remove your glasses when you're doing this?
If you can. Yeah, if you can. So especially if you have contacts, right? So glasses are a little bit of a caveat, right? Because you have glasses, light still gets in and around and under and all that, right? But if you have contacts, that's actually ideally you want to remove those. And look, I actually had clients that improved their eyesight because they started going outside without sunglasses and getting their eyes exposed. So this is the opposite of what most ophthalmologists will tell you, which is that sunlight's bad for your eyes. UV, infrared, the whole spectrum is actually good for your eyes. So I've seen it many times where their eyesight will actually improve. So, and if you have really sensitive eyes, the key is to slowly desensitize your eyes, right? So
I have something about this. So I learned from Claudia Muhlenweg a while ago, who works with eye health naturally. And she was talking about the sunglasses and that people who wear the sunglasses all the time, the minute they go outside, really have issues. And that was me. That was totally me. So I started biking and started gradually, just like you said, stopping the sunglasses. And what happened was at nighttime, lights would bother my eyes. They were so sensitive, totally gone. So I can't agree. I just agree with what you're saying. And now I rarely, I'll wear them sometimes, but I try to get that light. It's made such a difference, and night driving doesn't bother me. So it's so
and it'll preserve eye health. It'll preserve eye health as you get older, right? So so in other words, when I go to the beach today, I live in San Diego, so there's lots of sunny days here. When I go to the beach, I don't wear sunglasses. Why? It improves my hormone production, improves my sleep, and preserves my eye health 30 years down the road, right? So what we're talking about is a consistency. We're not talking about a quick fix, but if we do this consistently, where we're getting our eyes and to some degree our skin exposed to the sun on a regular basis, then our body's rhythm will stay on point. So I've seen this. I had a 29-year-old Canadian Special Forces come to me, and he had his testosterone was a little lower than it should be, right? And he was getting tested regularly with the military, and he had this little tiny pudge on his belly. Like, he wasn't fat. He just had this little thing he couldn't get rid of, right? It's almost like a vanity thing. Like, what the heck? I'm working out all the time. Why isn't this going away, right? And I said, well, these are linked, right? Your testosterone's a little lower than it should be, and you got this little extra belly fat. So it turns out he was really not sleeping well. So we fixed his circadian rhythm. He started getting tired at like 9. By the way, he's doing exactly what I tell him to, right? He's a military guy, so he's great client. So he gets up in the morning, he goes, I think he usually went for a run, right? But he'd at least go for a walk in the first thing in the morning. And after about 3 or 4 weeks, his testosterone shot through the roof, the belly fat went away. And in like 5 or 6 days, he was telling me, he's like, I'm getting tired at 9. Is that normal? I'm like, yeah, this is great. Your body's like craving this. So he go, okay. And then he go, I'm dreaming like crazy. Like, is this normal? What's going on? I'm like, yes, this is good. Right. So he had to readjust. In other words, when you do this right, your body starts to get on its own timing. Some people tell me, oh, I'm a night owl. Well, maybe. We do know there are chronotypes. There are people that are night owls. There's early birds, right? There's people in the middle. And this makes sense, actually, sort of, if you think about kind of historically how humans might have dealt with predators and things at night, right? We have different shifts, you could say. So this all actually makes sense from that perspective. But some people who think they're night owls, they're not. They're just the circadian rhythms off. They're used to staying up until 1 or 2 a.m. They're used to doing these things and being active until that. And so when you start dialing in the circadian rhythm, your body will eventually start becoming tired at its natural and normal time. So you might be a night owl, but instead your body's natural bedtime is like 10:30, right? Instead of 1:30. So, and this is what we want. We want this like natural ability to fall asleep. I think at some point we all have been in this place, whether we're traveling or whatever the case is, where you're just like, your eyes are so heavy. You might even be driving down the road and you just can't keep your eyes open. I've definitely had this. That's what we want each night. We want this drowsiness to set in naturally. Going to bed should not be a struggle. We shouldn't have to do a million practices just so that we can fall asleep. That is a result of a mistimed circadian rhythm. And they've taken people out into camping, right? So they've taken people camping, insomniacs, and they go, I think, camping for like 14 or 21 days. And all the insomniacs were sleeping normal after that time. So it's just a matter of being outside, getting that light, being on rhythm. So get up in the morning, go for your walk. In the middle of the day, you should be exercising and eating your biggest meal. So think about your digestion it follows the sun. So the highest point, when the sun is the highest point in the sky, that is when your digestion is the strongest. So any heavy meals, difficult meals to digest, you want to be eating toward the middle of the day. If you're eating a very big, heavy meal, in fact, when we were in Sardinia, we were eating like true Italians, and man, they do not, these days, not the best sort of dietary framework, right? Like we had like 9 courses, right? And it's like 9 p.m. and they're chatting. That's too much, right? When you're overeating at 8 and 9 p.m., New Yorkers, Philadelphia, like all you East Coasters, I'm speaking to you, eating too late, big, heavy meals, and even drinking a little alcohol, this will absolutely destroy your hormones. Yeah, there's lots of things happening that should happen as we start to fall asleep that prepares our body for all the necessary functions of sleep. So sleep is not just, closing our eyes and then eventually waking up. There's so much happening, right? Between cleaning out the brain, detoxification, restoring hormones and neurotransmitters. There's all kinds of things that are really important during that sleep process, and that can get disrupted if we're not eating at the right time. So the second most important part is to eat your heavy stuff and work out during the middle of the day. And the third component is do not eat 3 hours before bed. So if you can avoid food completely within 3 hours of bedtime, that's ideal. Some people are a little hypoglycemic. They might need, there's different sort of constitutional types also that might need a little food between that 3 hour mark in bedtime. So, a little bit of honey, some almonds, these type of things can be effective, maybe an hour or so before bed. But the idea is that you don't want to be stuffing your face with a pint full of ice cream 30 minutes before you're going to bed. Like your body's trying to go to sleep. It's trying to detoxify. It's trying to create hormones. It's not trying to digest this really heavy, processed food. So if you can do those things, follow the rhythm of the day with exercise and meal timing, get up in the morning, first thing, go for a 15-minute walk, and don't eat 3 hours before bed, your body's going to start understanding what time is the best time to digest. It's going to start getting in sync. And again, it's about consistency. So doing these things consistently for minimum 2 or 3 weeks, and then your body will start really humming. It will expect meals at a certain time. It will expect to go to bed. Remember, your body's always trying to predict the activity, and it's based off of that solar cycle and your interaction with your environment.
Wow, I love this for many reasons. I mean, one, it's free. This is something we can
Exactly.
Now, let's take the people who can't do all of this. And what do you say to your clients who are like, I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. My job starts at 6. Do you do anything to simulate that? What do you have any hacks, or what do you say to those people who just truly, or they live somewhere where it's dark till, later? How do you counsel? What do you say?
Yeah. Yeah. So if let's just take the modern person, right, living in a reasonable latitude, right, that's not in Iceland somewhere. You know, what I would say is I always try to point people to the optimal way of living. So in other words, yes, there are hacks and tricks, but be careful that you don't make your entire lifestyle a hack and a trick, right? So it's just that big caveat of like, whatever you can do to start to organize your life that is more conducive to thriving. Like if you're working night shifts, God bless you, but like if you can figure out a way to start to get a job, to find a way to work and follow your passions, do what you love, that doesn't involve you working at night, do that. Like do whatever you can. And look, I was a perfect example of this. I was living a life that I was not in love with. I was an engineer and I was like, I don't really enjoy what I'm doing. So I did what I could to figure out how to follow my passion. It was not easy, but it's worth it. So when it comes to your health, it's like really the North Star should be whatever you can do to live in harmony, right? That said, perhaps we're kind of in a halfway step, right? Or we're in a transitory period, right? There are some, SAD light boxes that you can get, right? Seasonal affective disorder light boxes. I don't have any brands that I can sort of recommend, but you can use that as a tool to sort of initiate that light. Still not going to be the same as the sun, right? So that's one way. You can use breath work. So you can use the breath of fire. So it's you can just Google this. It's very simple, but you're breathing in and out pretty rapidly. You got to be careful if you've got heart issues, if you're pregnant. There's some people that shouldn't do that. You have hypertension, because it does activate the body in a huge way. But that's a really good way to turn on. The breath is one of these things that it's one of the few things that is involuntary and voluntary. We can control it, and it's passive. That is a regulator of pretty much all of our systems in our body. Right. So it's why breathwork has been around for so long, and it's kind of making a comeback here in the West. But you can use the breath of fire. You can use a little bit of movement, a little bit of physical activity, right? If the sun's down, like if you wake up at 4, well, it's a different thing. But if you wake up at 5 and the sun's still not up, and you have, an hour to get ready for work, do a little like high intensity thing, get the body revved up, this type of thing. So you can use those techniques. But again, and then let's take the other example that you gave, right? So if you live in, let's say, Sweden or Norway or Finland or Iceland, and I've been up there during the summer and the winter, it's a little bit bizarre. The idea is that you actually want to follow those rhythms as much as you can. So in the winter, you're actually going to slow your life down considerably. You're going to sleep more. You're going to follow that rhythm. Now, you can't follow it completely, but the way that people got around it before the Industrial Revolution, before electricity, was that they were outside. They were in the cold. And we saw this in the Himalayas as well. So the cold and the dark go together. So if you're in a dark environment with not a lot of light, the cold is actually providing that stimulus to your body that is sort of necessary. So, but in our modern world, we have the darkness, and now we're inside in a temperate environment, and that's a mismatch. So our biology doesn't really like that. So the reason they didn't get seasonal affective disorder in Alaska, 150 years ago, is because they were cold. They were basically doing cold thermogenesis. They were in ice baths, you could say, for pretty much the whole day, right? And of course, they had fires, which is your infrared sauna. So they were doing nothing. Sweden and Finland, they're known for this, right? So that cold and infrared like stimulus constantly is the recipe for the no light, no sun environment. You see what I mean? So that's how we get out of that. So if you're in that environment, do what your ancestors did, right? And I've been to Iceland as well. Go into those thermal baths, right? Do the saunas, go into the cold plunges, get that in that thermal environment, and that will sort of rescue you. But that's really not most people, right? Most people are dealing with temperate, moderate environments, and in which case you want to follow the rhythms of the day throughout the seasons, and that 1 or 2 minute adjustment in sunrise and sunset each day, your body will adjust. It can adjust to that, right? That's a small fractional environment. So if we're outside all the time, our biology is slowly adapting to the seasons, to the longer days and then back to the shorter days and longer days. And our thyroid hormone, it fluctuates. A thyroid hormone should be lower during the winter, right? In fact, we see this with circadian rhythm. At 9 in the morning, we have all these thyroid transcription factors turn on. And then at noon, there's hardly any that are active. And so it has a rhythm, right? So everything has a rhythm. So it's really important to just follow these natural rhythms no matter where you're at. And so whatever you can do, but I think the blue blocking glasses is kind of critical for pretty much everybody. Another great one I had my clients do, they thought I was so weird, is get, like this salt lamp back here, which is full of orange light. They make orange light bulbs now, or no blue light bulbs. So I tell them to put all these light bulbs in lamps and other things, because I can't replace the ceiling ones, right? Some people can't replace their ceiling lights. So you just get a bunch of lamps, you get a bunch of candles, you get a bunch of salt lamps. So you start decorating your house with these orange and red and yellow lights, and it becomes a serene orange glow at night. And at first it might seem weird, but this will it will turn on this sort of sleepiness, right? It just starts to like make you groggy. So, you can change your environment pretty dramatically.
At what time do you recommend people start with the blue blocking glasses in the evening?
Ideally, as soon as the sun goes down, right? So, this is if you pay attention to the sun, right? In the morning, right? Just when it's above the horizon, there's not much blue and UV, right? The UV and the blue are short wavelength light, and it bounces off the atmosphere and goes back into space. Right. So as the sun rises and that angle changes, the shorter wavelengths start to penetrate the atmosphere, which is why we get our, UV light during the middle part of the day. And of course, as the sun sets, right, and it's just above the horizon, everything looks orange and red and yellow. And the only time you see blues and purples and greens is because that sunlight is the blues, purples, and greens are bouncing off the atmosphere, and they might reflect on a cloud. And that's where you get that beautiful color, right? That cotton candy sky. Only when there's clouds. You cannot get a cotton candy sky if there's no clouds. All you see is orange and red. So that's the only thing making its way through the atmosphere. And so, this is why you see people in old ancient cultures have done sun gazing, right? That's actually part of sending that signal to the brain through the eyes of what time of day it is. So there's all kinds of things we can do, but as the sun's going down, you should only see red, orange, and yellow. That's the time when we should be instituting blue blocking glasses. We should not be getting blues and greens at that time of night, because your eye can tell the difference, right? It sees the small amounts of blues and greens, and it tells the brain that it's daytime, when in fact it's actually 11 p.m.
Wow. I mean, to me, I see in my community the biggest thing, the biggest, and sleep is so critical for your bones as well as every aspect of your health. What I see the biggest thing, honestly, is the cell phone, is the computer at night, or is the iPad. And people don't realize, I want to talk to my friends. I want to talk to this. It's so damaging. And I know when I was teaching night classes on the computer, I wouldn't sleep. I'd be up. So,
Totally.
It makes
And it's hard. It's hard. Like, I mean, I'm a human in this world too, right? Like, I have that desire to pick up my phone, to do the things that I want to do, to work at night. And so I'm not saying that you can't do those things. Ideally, we wouldn't do those things. Like, the real practice for me is to just put that stuff down, to shut off the stimulus, right? Because all of these things, the stimulus, the lights, like even the temperature, the food, the activity, all of this is daytime stuff. What we want to be doing is winding everything down. We want to communicate to our nervous system that it's time to slow down. It's time to calm down. It's time to get dark. It's time to get quiet, right? So any kind of breath work, bath, meditation, yoga, qigong, chatting with friends, like all of this is really the key to instituting a really good nighttime environment. But you're right. It's hard because this stuff is so pervasive and it's so subtle in a sense, right? It can keep us awake, but we don't notice the damages, right? It's like you can get away with, I mean, my whole 20s, through college and a little after, was just getting away with things, right? Like what I did to my body is unbelievable. And the fact that we survive and we can even sometimes thrive through it is wild, right? Until we can't, right? And that's the thing. And so, we have an upcoming summit called the Ageless Energy Summit, coming up here soon. And this is one of the things that we wanted to communicate is to that group that's like in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, which is when most people's health starts to decline, right? And it's like they can't figure out, is it because I'm getting older, or is it something going on, right? And this is what happens, is that when the habits are not really dialed in, and we have an environment that is pretty conducive to disease, we start seeing these things come to light, right? The osteopenias, the osteoporosis, right? The gut issues, the brain issues, right? The cognitive things coming in here and there. These immune challenges start showing up, right? All this stuff starts to crop up at some point, 30s, 40s, 50s. And this is who we really are speaking to in our summit. And what I found is really important to speak to that group, because, again, we got away with a lot in our 20s and 30s typically, right? But at some point the chickens come home. And it's really important to establish really healthy habits, to figure out what's really causing these health issues, because it's not just age. Right? Age is not a thing that causes health issues, right? Function can definitely be limited. And I saw this in the blue zones. We hung out with people that were 98 and 104, and Julio was my favorite. He's 105 in Sardinia, and he was riding his bike still, but he was old. I mean, he couldn't hear very well. He was kind of hunched over. Like, this is what happens. Like, aging is a thing. Like, function declines. Gravity has an effect on us, right? Life has an effect. But he wasn't riddled with disease. He didn't have autoimmune conditions and skin problems, and he was relatively healthy. It's just his faculties were going, right? And so age is a thing, but it doesn't have to come with all this suffering and all this confusion, right? And all this pain. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is really help people live a healthier life as they get older.
It's never too early, but it's also never too late. And
Right.
people, what happens in this community is, someone finds out they have a diagnosis of osteoporosis, and it's a catalyst. It's a catalyst to have them stop in their tracks. What am I doing? Let me find out the root causes. And on this journey is when they start incorporating all these wonderful things that you're talking about, and life becomes miraculous. Everything starts to improve. But I'm really excited about your summit. You have phenomenal speakers. You want to share a little more about what people are talking about, because this is happening soon and it's free and it's available to everybody. So tell us a little more, because you really put together a great program.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's we dive into a wide variety of things, right? We're talking about. I'll give you. There's a couple that are most people haven't heard of, right? So I've got Dr. Felix Liao on. He's a dear friend, and actually I can show you. He was a dentist, and he trains what he calls airway mouth doctors. And basically, when the jaw, the palate, the face does not develop optimally, this is what causes all kinds of health issues, right? Because the tongue does not fit into the mouth, because the jaw is not wide enough, the teeth aren't wide enough. There's not enough space, what he calls 3-foot tiger or 6-foot tiger in a 3-foot cage. Got this tongue jammed into our mouths, and then it backs up our airways and we can't breathe. This is what causes sleep apnea, causes chronic pain, causes digestive issues, all these types of things, right? And so I actually worked with one of his trained dentists to get one of these devices that fits into my mouth and helps widen my palate. Now, I didn't have sleep apnea or issues, but I did this as a preventative measure, because if the jaw is wide enough, the bite is aligned, and everything is correct, not only do all your teeth fit in your mouth, and we don't have to pull wisdom teeth out and get root canals and all this stuff, but we're sleeping better, right? And so if I can sleep better, if my nervous system is more aligned and can tap into the parasympathetic better, it's not so jammed into sympathetic overdrive, then everything improves down the line. So he's one. Dr. Felix is great. Talking about he actually has a presentation on what's really going on and all the amazing case studies that he has, which is truly amazing. We've got Dr. Heather Sanderson talking about brain health and avoiding Alzheimer's and what you can do to prevent and even reverse Alzheimer's. We've got Dr. Amy Horman talking about T2 thyroid hormone, right? Most people have heard of T3 and T4, but very few people know about T2. And T2 is very, very important for the thyroid and for energy. We talk about parasites. We talk about how you can use a gut test, why you must kind of clean up your liver, how to clean up the liver. We've got Dr. Austin Perlmutter talking about brain health as well. Dr. Joel Kahn talking about cardiovascular health. So we really got we've got Dr. Dawson Church and Dr. Keisha Ewers and Alex Howard talking about trauma and that side of the equation. So we really took a well-rounded approach here because we really feel like, you named it, right? When somebody figures out they have, let's say, osteopenia. Well, if they really get into the causes of what's really happening there, and you keep digging, you find something. And then you dig. In engineering, we call this the 5 whys. So you ask a question and you get an answer. And you say, okay, well, why did that happen? Right? You ask why once, and then you have an answer. And then you say, okay, well, why did that happen? You ask it again. So you keep asking why, and then you keep digging deeper into what's really happening here. And when you do this with health, you start recognizing, oh, actually, I need to improve my circadian rhythm. I need to improve my sleep. I need to, I have opportunities to improve breath work or heal trauma, right? Or change my diet or supplement with nutraceuticals, right? Or exercise in a specific way. So when you start recognizing what's happening, it's not just one thing, right? It's never one thing that causes cancer. It's never one thing that causes the osteopenia. It's never one thing that destroyed your gut health. It's usually a whole network of things. And there's an opportunity to address many things at once. And so, one of the things that I've become passionate about is not only the root cause of some health issues, but when we talk about root cause, generally there's something else that happens. Like if I get mold, right, and that can cause all kinds of health issues. Well, my nervous system starts to get patterned into this threat mode. So the brain and the nervous system can be habituated into threat, right? Into parasympathetic or into sympathetic overdrive, into this fight or flight mechanism. Now, when I clean up the mold, I work with a practitioner, we do a great job. We clean up the mold, we support the body, everything's functioning great. My nervous system can still be stuck in this threat mode. And therefore my symptoms don't go away. So a lot of people are actually solving their quote unquote root cause, but their nervous system is still stuck in threat mode, right? So this has been a big passion of mine, is helping people understand this component, that you can get rid of the cause and yet the body is still entrained. It's still mapped. It's still patterned into this threat mode. And there's things that we can do to change that. And that was really the key thing for me when it comes to pain. My chronic pain, what I eventually realized is, yes, there's causes, but my brain started getting conditioned to this pain signal. And so I had to retrain my brain to not view the world as threatening when it comes to, this pain. So we disconnect the pain and the threat. And so you can retrain these things. So chronic pain, 95% of chronic pain has this component of being brain-based. So it's not the physical thing. It's not what you're eating. Yes, we can address those things. That may be important too. But what's really driving the pain is that frequency, that signal. It's like a chihuahua, right? Chihuahua barks at everything, right? At every little noise, a chihuahua barks. We want to turn your chihuahua into a golden retriever, right? We want that golden retriever to hear a noise and just be chill, right? So we need to retrain the brain. So that's part of what we cover as well. So there's a multifactorial kind of approach here, but again, it's really designed to address that person that's in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and even beyond. There's really not sure what's happening here, what's going on, and how do I address these things that are starting to crop up.
Oh, I love it. And I'm such a believer in knowledge is power. And, sometimes it's that one thing. Oh, wow. And just
That's right.
It is an onion. It's not simple. Nothing's simple. And, we go through layers, and it's really, and it takes time. It takes time.
But there's usually that aha, right? Like, yeah, I really agree with you. Like there can be 1,000 helpful things, but there's usually 1 or 2 aha moments for somebody, and that they become like the real linchpin to turning their life around.
It's so true. It's so true. And that's why I love summits, because it's sort of like a smorgasbord. There's different options to choose what fits for you. And then I couldn't agree.
Something clicks.
Yeah. So tell everybody the dates when this is, because it's happening pretty soon.
Yeah, it starts March 13th, March 13th to March 19th. So it's 6 days, completely free. And I think, do you have a link, Margie, that
Yes, yes.
you
I'll
can
put the
attach?
link in
Perfect.
the link will be in the show notes.
Perfect. Yeah. So it's free from March 13th to 19th. And so we just want to get this information out to as many people as possible. There's 27 experts. There's, I think, 30 talks in total, and some of them include actual kind of PowerPoint presentations that go pretty deep.
Oh, that's great. And tell everybody also how they can contact you and a little bit about, because you have some other work that's so fascinating that you're involved with.
Yeah, I'd say the main thing, they can go to awakenedhealthacademy.com. That's where I've got a lot of my content. I'm not really big on social media these days. I mean, you can find me in social media, but I'm not really doing much there. So main place is awakenedhealthacademy.com.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that we left out that you want to share? This has been so helpful. And I challenge everybody. These are not hard things to do. I just have to say, I was at a conference for 3 days last week in New York City, and I got up early, had to go right to like breakfast, lunch, meetings. And so I did not get to go outside, and I was indoors the entire day. And it really made a difference. Just 3 days, I was like, oh my gosh, get me back to being outside.
Well, I've got a 5-year-old, so it's like he's my window into that. Like, I mean, if he's not outside, like, he's a different human. So we are wired to sort of be amongst nature, right? So I mean, the only sort of closing thought I'd say is, it's so worth it when it comes to changing your health. There may be one thing that you really are wanting to change, whether it's bone related or gut related, or mental health. Whatever the case is when you start pursuing that and really figuring out what's underlying that, as that begins to resolve, it's almost like everything else starts to resolve as well, right? Like, everything is so interrelated. And so when you start changing your health, your whole reality changes. Your finances change, your relationships change, right? Your passions and your pursuits change, your spiritual life changes. So it's just so worth it. I've seen it so many times, and every person that I've coached and helped get to the other side of their illness, they always look back and they go, that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. All that misery was so important because it got me here, and I wouldn't be here without it, right? And so it's a little bit hard to see when you're kind of stuck in it. I've been there many times. And so, but I just want to sort of give that ray of hope that it's so worth it, moving through that and figuring out what's really going on.
Wow, I love that. And I always think that I agree that there is a silver lining. It's so often people look back and it was a blessing in disguise. So I'm right there with you. Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited about the summit. I just think there's always new things to learn. And as you said, you never know what you're going to pick up. So thank you I know how hard summits are to put together. And it does take a lot of hard work and effort, but so many people are
It's worth it.
So many people's lives are going to be improved. So thank you so much for the work you do and for taking the time to join me here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Margie.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jason as much as I did, and now have a better understanding of circadian rhythm and how we can take these concepts and put them into our modern lives. And that will improve our bones, overall health, increase our happiness, and reduce our stress. A win-win situation. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you'll become notified of all the upcoming episodes. And thank you so much for tuning in. All the links will be in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.